So I will go ahead and get started for today. Welcome everyone. We really appreciate your time. We got a couple more people coming in. I am Latasha Sims. I'm the Digital Accessibility Lead here at Case Western Reserve University. So I just want to thank you all for joining us for our important session on teaching smarter and not harder and designing things for all learners. I'm here today with Miranda Sepúlveda, our Digital Accessibility Associate, and Francine Diaz, the Mandel Digital Accessibility Coordinator. And together, we are your go-to team for digital accessibility support here at CASE. And so don't hesitate to reach out to us at tltaccessibility@case.edu if you need digital accessibility support. Great. Now, Miranda, Francine, and I are a part of the TLT team, or the Teaching and Learning Technology team. We work closely with faculty, staff, and students to maximize their teaching and learning experiences here at CASE. So from answering any questions that you may have about technologies to assisting with developing your teaching resources or rethinking your syllabus, we really try to help create active learning environments and face-to-face and blending learning, and we are here to help on the TLT team. The TLT works together, of course, with our partners across campus at the KSL Library and USite in order to provide the resources to students, faculty, and staff. We use Canvas for our learning management system, Echo 360 for our video management and lecture capture, and Poll Everywhere for our international audience response systems. So if you ever need help with any of that stuff, we are the team that you want to talk to. Great. Oh, I got another person coming in here. Okay, so today I'm just going to give you a short overview of what digital accessibility looks like here at Case Western Reserve University. Then I'm going to turn it over to Ebony Porter, our Associate Dean and Director of Disability Resources here at Case, to give you some tidbits of best practices on how to best accommodate students who have an accommodation. And then finally, our faculty expert, Dr. Cheryl Burgstaller, founder of the Accessible Technology Services at University of Washington and a current affiliate of the University of Washington is City of University of New York, in CUNY in New York. She is going to give us an overview of universal design for learning. So let's move on. All right. So at the heart of our efforts here at Case Western Reserve University is our digital accessibility policy that was approved in 2021. This policy helps to ensure that our digital content from our websites to documents are usable by everyone. So it's not just a compliance thing for us here at Case. It's about equity and it's about good design, and that means being mindful of how content looks, sounds, and works for everyone across our digital platform. So Miranda, Francine, and I work together under the Office of the Provost to provide all of the faculty and staff support for digital accessibility. Our goal is to show a good faith effort towards policy maturity, meaning we are committed to progress and not perfection. We are focusing on raising awareness, delivering targeted training, and improving accessibility campus-wide for all of our stakeholders. We are transforming accessibility into an integral part of campus culture through our three-phase strategic plan. In 2023, We established baseline standards for using the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines to launch our training and support for faculty, staff, and student employees. And we also developed our partnerships, of course, across the campus with disability resources, university marketing, communications, and our IT contracts department. In 2024, we continued to grow and integrate and strengthen our communication to our community and have engagement and try to have some sort of metric for our progress in digital accessibility. And for this year, we are focusing on optimizing our campus efforts campus-wide, based on our training, policy updates, and metrics for reporting. So these initiatives, again, they are about equity, usability, and building a truly accessible digital experience for everyone. And I'm proud to report that through our training efforts, over 1,000 badges have been awarded across 11 groups here at the university since 2023. We've launched a series of self-paced digital accessibility trainings that are available to faculty, staff, and student employees. So we plan to continue our badging efforts and showcase. You have the opportunity to showcase your learning and your commitment to digital accessibility by clicking on the enrollment links that can be found in today's presentation. All right. So in 2021, 21% of our undergraduate students enrolled here at CASE registered for some form of disability resources support. This signifies a sharp increase in the need for accessible digital content, ranging from our university websites to individual course content. And as we increase our enrollment, these numbers continue to grow. So it is my pleasure to introduce a leader who has dedicated over a decade to fostering accessibility and inclusion in higher education, Ms. Ebony Porter, our Associate Dean and Director of Disability Resources and Accommodated Testing Services here at CASE. Ebony has a master's degree in community health from Cleveland State University, and she has a deep expertise in nonprofit leadership, social services, and community advocacy. Ebony is probably one of the most compassionate people I have ever met. And she helps us to navigate the very, very complex world of providing disability support services to our students at Case Rest and Reserve. So she will guide us through some of the best practices for faculty who need to faculty who have students who need accommodations. Ebony, I'd like for you to welcome you today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. So thank you, Latasha, for that introduction. I feel like a little fancy is what I told Latasha yesterday. I feel like this person isn't me. I don't know who that is. But I've worked at Case since 2015. So it's been 10 years, February 15th, I believe, or February 9th was my 10-year anniversary here at the university. Prior to that, I worked 13 years in residential treatment. So nonprofit as a supervisor for an all-girls unit and a co-ed unit for adolescents with mental health challenges that led them to be in residential instead of out in the community. So I've always provided services there. Latasha, if you want to go to the next slide. So I just want to briefly the next part. So I briefly want to tell you like who we service. So we service students with disabilities, but we also provide support to faculty and instructors. So we help faculty and instructors navigate the implementation of accommodations for students. What we do is we provide students with disabilities support through academic accommodations. We look at their transportation, and we also meet with them if they want to, weekly, biweekly, or monthly through individual consultations to kind of talk over our disability management. With faculty, we support faculty to maintain the integrity of their course when implementing accommodations. So just because we approve a student for an accommodation within our office doesn't necessarily mean that all those accommodations are going to carry over into the classroom. So our staff's job is to work with faculty to look at, is this a reasonable accommodation request for the course that they're in? I work personally more so with our medical school students, dental students, medical anesthesia program, and our MSTP program. In those different programs, I have to look at the clinical setting. So in a clinical setting, if I approve a student for additional time on assessments, that may not work on a clinical assessment because there's a patient safety concern that might be included in there. So it may not be a reasonable accommodation to have additional time on an assessment because we're looking at if there's a patient, if there's medication that they are going to be given, if there is a certain amount of time before that medication wears off, is the student going to be able to have additional time to complete a procedure? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we're going to have to look at it in that sense as to, or do they need to make a decision very quick and know what the next determination is going to be to make sure that student or that patient gets the support they need from a different provider or something like that? Do they need to go to the emergency room? So we're going to look at all those things when making accommodations. With the faculty, you all are the experts in your field. I don't know your field. I don't know your course. So if you come to me and say, hey, this student requested flexible attendance is probably our biggest concern from faculty when we're looking at modifying the attendance policies. If you come to me as a faculty and say, I have a student that's requesting flexible attendance, this is what my class looks like. Is it reasonable? Certain classes, flexible attendance isn't reasonable because of the nature of the course. We're not asking you to change your course and make it a one-on-one independent course. So we're going to say to you that may not be reasonable. There may not be additional flexibility in your course, things like that. When it comes to accessibility, when we're looking at digital, things like that, our office, we can't make the course itself accessible, but we can connect you to the right person and we can let you know what the student's accommodation is and maybe give you an idea of maybe something to support the student. So there are some classes that do the flipped classroom. While it works for some students, it doesn't work for all students. So if we have a student with a seizure disorder sitting in front of the computer for hours on end, it's not going to be helpful, where they need to take a lot of breaks, things like that. So is there a way for that student to get that same content offline? If there's presentations that are online, Zoom, things like that, and you're doing a presentation and you have, like, you're pointing something out, our office will say, in that moment, read what you're pointing out. If you have a slide, reading the information that's on your slide is going to be really helpful for students with visual impairments, or again, those students with seizure disorders that may have to look away from the screen, but they're listening to everything that's being said, so they're still getting access to that content. We also work with faculty if it's a hybrid course or an online course, or if there's videos and things like that. If the student has a hearing impairment or is deaf or hard of hearing, we're going to work with the student if they're approved for CART, which is real-time closed captioning. We're going to work with that student, and one of our staff is going to send information out to the faculty and connecting them with a CART provider who's going to need access to any materials you have, videos, things like that, so they can make it accessible for the student in your classroom. So there's a lot of supports that our office can give. We just need faculty to come to us and reach out to us and let us know, but we're always available because our job is a neutral in the situation. So we look at an interactive process, and in our interactive process, we are advocating for the student, but we're also advocating for faculty. So we really want faculty to know that we're here for everybody, and we're not just saying the student's right and this accommodation has to happen, because it may not be reasonable in the type of course that you're instructing. So the how students register with our office. So when students register with us, they complete a new student application online. They provide us with supporting documentation from their care providers. Our staff then review that documentation. They review the application. They then meet with the student. They discuss the requested accommodations. Depending on if they're a grad or professional student, they may reach out to the program to kind of have conversations about what's reasonable, what's not. Undergrads are a little bit different because their classes are going to change throughout the year. So their accommodations, maybe we approve them for something, but we come back and talk with faculty to see if it's reasonable. Later when the student gets to that those specific courses. The other part of that is if a student has a remote attendance request. So most of our classes are fully in person, but we do get requests from students to be fully remote. So we might reach out to faculty. We will reach out to faculty in those instances to have a conversation as to whether or not their course can be remote or can be hybrid and what that would look like if it's reasonable. Sometimes it's the faculty's, it could be a faculty's disability or learning style that may make it challenging for remote learning, for the class to be remote. So we really have to take that into consideration. So we might have to loop in the Office of Equity to look at how can we best accommodate the student and the faculty alike to make sure that each person has equal access to the classroom environment. Our contact information is there. So we're located in the Sears building, room 402. Our phone number is 216-368-5230. The email for our shared email is disability@case.edu. And then our website is students.case.edu/disability. And there is a faculty resource section where faculty can go and review information. Or again, always feel free to contact us and we'll be able to answer any questions. If we're not available when you contact us, our department assistant will make sure she shoots a chat to all of us within the DR side of things, disability resources side of things. And then somebody will follow up with whatever questions the faculty may have.
Thank you so much, Ebony. We really appreciate all of that information on how to support faculty and students who may need some accommodations. Thank you for helping us navigate that wild, wild world of helping.
Yeah. Yeah, and I forgot to say, I can tell you guys right now, we have 2,300 students that are connected to our office, not necessarily approved for accommodations, but there are 2,300, a little over 2,300 students connected with our office as of today. So that number, I want to say probably about 500 or 600 of those students don't have any approved academic accommodations. So that's a mixture of academic, clinical, and housing accommodations. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to have accommodation letters for faculty, but they are. There is 2,300 students connected with our office that are stating that they have a disability, so and needing support, requesting support.
Wow. Needs are definitely on the rise. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Ebony and the Disability Resources team. They're more than happy to support you and to fill you in with all that you need to know about student accommodations. Today, we are privileged. We have with us a true pioneer in the field of accessibility and in universal design. Dr. Cheryl Bergstaller is more than just an academic. She's a leader who has dedicated over 4 decades to advancing accessibility in higher education. As the founder of the Accessibility Technology Services at the University of Washington, she's been instrumental in developing innovative approaches to supporting students with disabilities and also faculty members who want to support students who have disabilities. Dr. Bergstaller's work extends far beyond a single institution. She is the driving force behind the Do It Disabilities Opportunities Interworking at Technology Center. That is an initiative that has connected students with disabilities from across the state, nation, and international networks. Her research and publications, including her groundbreaking books on things like creating inclusive learning opportunities in higher education and universal design in higher education, have become essential resources for educators who are committed to an inclusive, reflective practice. And today she is going to share some of her extensive insights and expertise with us in terms of universal design for learning applications in the classroom and teaching smarter, not harder. Welcome, Dr. Burkstaller. Thank you for being
Oh,
with
well,
us
thank
today.
you for having me. So am I set up to push these slides?
Yep, you should be able to share.
I'm not seeing my little arrow here. Let me see. Maybe I'll just maybe use my keyboard. Now my slides aren't showing. The slides aren't showing up now. I can't see the slides. And my arrow just beeps at me. Let's see. I don't see anything I can do.
Would you like me to share for you?
Yeah. Maybe that. Seems like I should be able to see it if your participants can see it. Okay, so you're going to push the slides?
Yep, sure.
Okay, that works. I'll try to give you a little cue when I'm going on to the next one. So we're talking about universal design for all. And I've, practiced this framework, developed a framework about universal design in higher education for many years. And I practice what I preach. I retired from my career about a year ago, but at the University of Washington, but I didn't retire from my career. I just retired from my full-time job and decided to stay involved with things I like the most. And I love to teach. And I particularly like to teach online, partly because with my husband and I travel quite a bit. We're in Hawaii right now. And so I don't have to be tied down to on-site. I really like hybrid best if I have my choice, but I don't want to be tied down anymore. And so I do a lot of teaching and presentations and so forth. And it really helps me to keep me honest about how to do this and make reasonable changes and improvements to your classes. I started class teaching, I'm just working on one yesterday that I'm going to start in a couple of weeks. So I'm really interested in this area. I'm learning more every day. I really like your idea of not focusing on perfection, but making sure that you're making continual progress. Faculty will sometimes say they get overwhelmed when they hear about all these things they need to do. They never give it a thought. It seems really hard. Well, it seems really hard because it's a new thing that they're doing. And so they have to go back and retrofit. That's always hard. That's always hard. We have to redo it. But I always encourage them, well, just pick one thing. There's a list. Pick one thing and just do that. And then maybe pick something else and just go down that list, have your own little checklist. Because everything that you do reduces the need for some of the services that Ebony's group does, where they're often trying to catch up, play catch up in your class so that those students with disabilities that need accommodations, get them soon enough and so they can be really effective. And I often run into faculty looking at classes where the two things that are inaccessible, two of them are the syllabus in an inaccessible PDF and a little introduction video on YouTube that isn't accurately captioned. Maybe it has the computer generated captions, but they haven't been edited for the students. So imagine for a minute, you have a student who's blind and needs to get an accessible version of the syllabus. They join your class. The first thing they look at is the syllabus, and what kind of a sign does that give to them? To me, I would guess, I can't say for them, but for me, I would think, oh, I'm not welcome here. This faculty member didn't even think that I might show up. And then the deaf student who goes to look at the video to learn more about the class, it's kind of a mean trick when you present them with no punctuation and misspelled words. I mean, for someone who has to rely on captions, again, that's kind of a mean trick, but it certainly sends that same message, so you're not welcome here. So one little tip that I give faculty too is to start looking at your first 2 weeks of class and just see if you can tidy that up, make it fully accessible. Because at least you give time for that student who needs accommodations to work with Ebony staff and with you to look down the road and see what else needs to be done to make that course accessible. And something that at the University of Washington, I run into faculty, so I'll say this other little tip before I get started here is you can tell I have a lot of tips, is to try to use accessible products from the beginning. Just think about accessibility and everything that you do, even if you don't know the answer. But to make sure that you're always kind of aware of it. It's just kind of buzzing around. Even if you don't know the answer to the question, you could make a note of it, about the accessibility of something. So anyway, so let's get started. I am Cheryl Bergstaller, and on this next slide, I'd like to show you, no, the next slide, right? That slide right there, universal design of physical spaces. You were right. And there is an image on the screen here. It's a little photocopy of the 1970 UW Daily. This is the student newspaper that still comes out at the University of Washington. And this is on the front page. It has a picture of a young man in a wheelchair and a lot of people walking around him. And he has a big sign on the back, and it's in capital letters. So I'm assuming that means he's shouting, "Ramp the curbs, get me off the street," on the back of his wheelchair. And so here was 1970 when this young man and many others were protesting because they couldn't get on the sidewalks, particularly at old institutions like the University of Washington. And many people at that time pushed back and said, well, really, come on. How many people do we have in wheelchairs on this campus anyway? And, you see all the curbs there, they're high for one thing at the university, they're old curbs. And it's like, think about how much that's going to cost, how hard that's going to be. Well, the only reason that was hard, and we did go ramp those curbs at the University of Washington, is because we didn't think about it in the beginning. And we didn't need universal design to make people think about that. People were in wheelchairs back when the university was built. So anyway, having more awareness of the needs of people with disabilities and other people, just thinking about how can we make this, whatever it is, a sidewalk in this case, so that more people can use it. And now a lot of curb cuts actually have some bumps on them too, so that people are using a white cane, they're blind, get more indication that a curb cut is coming up before they step into traffic. But anyway, so universal design is not new. Can be applied to everything. My little 3 or 4-year-old, I guess at the time when I was starting to talk about universal design, he'd see something that was kind of accessible. He'd say, look, Mama, it's universal design. So he still pulls that up once in a while. He's like 34 now. He said, look, Mom, it's universal design. Okay, on this next slide, then let's get started. So it's important to consider ability. And I think Ebony and her staff have to think about disability because they have laws to comply with and they have, documentation and so forth. Most of us don't have to think a lot about disability. We should be thinking about ability. And when you think about ability, we all have them abilities. And that includes everybody, not just people with disabilities. So if we look at ability on a continuum, where we go up on the left here, not able to do something, and way to the right, able to do something very well, maybe exceptionally well, maybe an award winner well, then everybody could make a little list here in this program and anywhere on ability to understand English. We could rate ourselves. Someone might rate themselves low in that category because English is not their first language. Somebody might because they have a hearing impairment, the deaf or hard of hearing. And so they can't hear spoken English. So anyway, so there might be reasons. It doesn't really matter so much. It's just imagine your class, there are people with a wide range of abilities to understand English. And social norms. We can think of disability and think of students on the autism spectrum, sometimes have difficulty in this area. But there are other people, maybe they grew up in a different culture that have difficulty with social norms as well. So it doesn't matter what the cause is, we just think there's great variety. And all these other characteristics, your ability to see, there might be a person attending today on Zoom, but they don't have access to the screen for some reason. Maybe low bandwidth with their computer network or whatever. Or they have the screen turned off for some reason. And so we just assume that somebody can't see this presentation. So I'm going to be speaking the key elements. I know you have the PowerPoint, so I don't have to speak everything, but I will speak everything that's required to understand what I'm talking about in this presentation. And that's because I don't know if there's someone that can't see that screen or not. And ability to hear and walk and ability to read, print, or to write with a pen or a pencil, to communicate verbally, to tune out distraction, to learn, and to manage physical and mental health. Just assume there's a great variety. Some people, when they first hear about making their course accessible to people with disabilities, they've got to take a bunch of workshops or read a lot of documentation on different types of disabilities. What's the difference between multiple sclerosis and muscular dystrophy? Or that you don't need to get into that. It's interesting if you're interested in that field. That's interesting, but not essential. just think about the great variety of ability that is in your class. On this next slide, I make a couple of notes that are important to think about. One is that races, ethnicities, gender identities, and disabilities and other characteristics may not be obvious. So just because you've seen people flow into your class or in the Zoom room, you're not going to be able to pick out people with disabilities and a lot of other identities as well. And then there's intersectionality. A person who's blind but also has a learning disability will have different issues than someone who's blind without a learning disability. And based on their ethnic background, maybe the financial state of their K-12 school environment, there are other identities that contribute. So it's not like one size fits all for a person with a particular type of disability. And so intersectionality is important. And many, at least many, if not most students with disabilities do not disclose them. And so they're worried about going to Ebony's office and of supporting the students with disabilities. They don't want to be identified as one. They worry that the faculty member is going to find out and will not count them in as a serious player if they want to major in their field of study. So we can't count on even getting letters from that office to tell us who has a disability. And campuses primarily offer accommodations to individuals after inaccessibility is discovered. So if you look at just the simple funding stream, most funding for students with disabilities pays for accommodations. It's not paying for things you do proactively. So we're going to talk about that proactive thing. So looking on the next slide, Ebony already gave you a good set of examples of types of accommodations that you have here on your campus. But just a couple I'll highlight, as I mentioned before, is that they're common and they're expensive, and they could be done differently. They could be done proactively. One is making inaccessible documents accessible, mainly reformatting PDF files. PDF files can be made accessible to a person who's blind and using, say, a screen reader to read that file. But it's more difficult than making a Word document accessible. And that's even more difficult than making just your HTML, your content page in Canvas, making that accessible. We'll talk about that more, some of the tips. And so anyway, but imagine if everybody here at Case Western made their syllabus accessible to all students, even if they were all doing PDF, then they wouldn't have to do that in that specially charged office. And then captioning videos, and I mean accurately captioning videos. And so that's another thing that can be done fairly easily, proactively. So let's move on to a new approach. Not exactly new, but new at this minute. And that's universal design. And so in broad terms, universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible, without the need for adaptation or specialized design. So we don't want to put Ebony staff out of business, but I'm sure they would find plenty of things to do in promoting universal design if they didn't have so many requests for accommodations. And so that's it. You can use it for anything. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see perhaps a name tag has my name on it, big bold letters, Cheryl, and then small Bergstaller, and has my title underneath it. And it looks like a plastic case that you find at conferences. Remember when we used to go to those? It's been a long time for me. Anyway, and so this is a name tag that we have universally designed. If you turned it over, it would have my name again in the back. And if any of you have gone to a conference when you have lanyards, often somebody's name flips over, and if I know a person well enough to flip over their lanyard, I already know their name. So I usually just ignore that. But some people don't like lanyards. They like clips or they like pins. I like to have a clip because I like my name to be closer to my face. And that's more useful when I'm looking at people too, to remind myself what their name is. And so if you notice on this plastic name tag holder, there is a clip. And so you can, and a clip clips to a ring that it connects to a lanyard. So I don't like a lanyard, so I can immediately clip that lanyard right off and use that clip instead to clip to my collar. And there's even a pin there, a safety pin. And so if you want to pin it, you don't have a collar or something, you can pin it to yourself as well. So that's just an idea. That's what we came up with on our staff when we're thinking, well, how can we make these name tags that we're always using for events more inclusive, more universally designed? And so that's what we did. So we'll hear more examples throughout the talk here. If you go to the next slide, there are 3 characteristics that I point out for universal design. What does it mean to be universal design? First of all, it's accessible, technically accessible. Accessible design is not always, but usually reserved to be more specifically focused on disability. And so a PDF that's accessible, so it's designed in a way that a blind person can use it. And so that's important. It has to be accessible to be considered a universal design, but that's not all. There are two other characteristics we should look at. It should be usable. So it's not enough just to have a bunch of shortcut keys to get to the functions of a piece of software. It's important that you can actually use those functions in a usable way so that it's not really hard for you to use that product if you happen to have a disability. It's not fair for the person with a disability to technically have access, but not really have it usable for them. And then there's inclusivity. A universally designed product should be inclusive. As much as possible, there should be one product for everyone. And then the features are flexible. There's flexibility in the product so that people with a variety of disabilities and other characteristics too can use it. So those are the three characteristics: accessible, usable, inclusive. So on the next slide, I give just a little outline of this framework that I developed. And there are a lot of free resources where you can read more about this, also in a book. But anyway, the framework for universal design in higher education. And so we're not going to go through this whole thing today, but these are the parts of it. You figure out what your scope is. Today, we're talking about teaching and learning. Okay, so that's our scope. We're not talking about, designing the gymnasium or something like that, but we could in a different talk, or services or something else. And so figure out what you're really focusing on. And I'm focusing on not just online classes, but on-site and hybrid ones as well. So you need a broad definition and application of universal design because there are a lot of different things in physical spaces as well as online. And then you need a definition. I gave you one. There are people who have come up with other definitions that you might find more appropriate. And then one thing I like about the definition of universal design is there are already sets of principles that have been developed for applying universal design. And then those principles lead to guidelines that are just more specific. And then practices that are really specific. They're like the tips I've given you so far. And then a process. How do you incorporate universal design? The basic idea, you incorporate it early and often throughout your process. On the next slide is a little bit images on universal design of technology. You don't have to go any further than your smartphone to see universal design features. You can change the background color of your screen, foreground background. That is a universal design characteristic that used to be with technology and assistive technology, a system device. That used to be an accommodation, and maybe it's something to connect to your computer so you can change that. But now accessibility features have been brought into mainstream technology, which makes them universal design features in my book. So the universal design of technology, all types of technology. First, it builds on is accessibility features. Your phone can talk to you a little bit too much in my case, but I'm not sure why they're talking to me sometimes. I just let them shut up. But anyway, it's nice that they're there. And then you ensure compatibility with assistive technology. Assistive technology is kind of like an accommodation. It's a technology that you add on for a specific person. I don't think it makes any sense to, for instance, have a Braille embosser on everybody's phone, just in case somebody needs Braille. That's a good add-on. So you want to make sure that your IT product is compatible. Most of you here today are not going to be making a lot of decisions in that area, but that's kind of that breakdown of the accommodation part, and then there's a universal design part. So in the next one, I like to emphasize that there are many people that benefit from universal design. We already talked about captions. We think about who can benefit from captions. Certainly people that can't hear the audio, people who are English language learners, people who are in a noisy environment, like the airport, or a noiseless one like the library, and they want to watch a video or something. People with slow internet connections, people who want to know the spelling of words. Many of us in a new class will be learning vocabulary, new vocabulary, and so having those words spelled out multiple times, including on videos, is really a benefit. And also you can find the content quickly if you have a device that will present those videos. So you can skim through, you can sort through all of the captions and find the content you're looking for. So on the next slide, I set out here to talk about 3 sets of principles. Many of you today probably have heard of one of the 3 sets, or maybe 2 of the 3 sets, depending on where you've applied it. First of all, there are 7 principles of universal design that connect with the definition that I gave. And often those principles are applied in the physical space. So maybe you have a teaching and learning lab where students are using computers to access courses and other content. Then you want to make sure that you have at least one adjustable table, so that someone in a wheelchair can get the right height for them, having space where people maneuver around a facility if they have a disability, and so forth. And so those are basic principles. They apply to everything. And then Universal Design for Learning came about later. And the CAST Center developed 3 principles that really apply to pedagogy and curriculum, something that faculty members should really be thinking about, besides the general principles. And then there are the web content accessibility guidelines. I say they've named them wrong because they're really universal design guidelines, because they cover things like, making your course accessible to some maybe with different reading levels, not necessarily a disability, and people who have difficulty distinguishing colors. They're colorblind, which is not a disability. And so they're doing more. They're doing universal design work. And so that's my third set of guidelines. And they have 4 principles that underpin those guidelines. So we talk about it if we have more time than today. But on the next slide, I've taken all of these principles and guidelines, and I kind of have created 2 to think about when you're doing instruction. One is provide multiple ways for participants to learn. So maybe using a video, and then maybe using a document or a website to demonstrate what they've learned. How do they show you they've learned something? Maybe you're going to have short quizzes, but also maybe you're going to grade them on their involvement in discussion. And maybe they'll have a project, different ways that they can show you what they've learned, and then to engage. For instance, in a class, I put in my syllabus for an online class. I say, well, if you want to meet one-on-one, that'd be great. Send me a message and let me know when you can meet, and how you'd like to meet. And that's an effort to use universal design, because it's only one-on-one. And so it's like, they should be able to choose. Some things you do a certain way because all the classes involved, not that one. And so some will actually choose to just meet with me using Skype, or I prefer Zoom. Some want to meet by phone, that's fine. But giving people choice when it's possible works in with your class. On the next slide, when we're developing the course, think about who might be in your class. And one thing that you think about is, okay, what disabilities or ability levels might be in the class, and what assistive technologies might they be using? So we'll go to the next slide where I'll introduce you to 4 people. And so this is a good way to think about what you need to do. These are 4 people that I know. They are participants in the Do It program and the IT accessibility team. And the first one's Zane. Zane's deaf. And so we need to make sure that she has access to audio. So those captions on videos and described, if you have audio clips, have them described as well. So that's fairly straightforward. And then we have Anthony. He was in the Do It program. Anthony has multiple functional limitations. He doesn't have a usable voice. He has a wide range of motion, but not fine motor skills to use a standard keyboard. And so what we have here, he has a large keyboard, and he can actually press the keys with his hand. He also uses a joystick to access some things like environmental controls and so forth in his independent living situation. And so there are all sorts of technologies that can help someone like Anthony fully use a computer. He even has ways to use a telephone using his keyboard, plus then there's a computerized voice that he can use. The thing to know if you're creating a website or other resource for a class is that Anthony has technology that can fully implement the keyboard. Anything you can do on a keyboard, he can do. But he doesn't have technology that can fully implement and regularly implement the mouse. He can't use a mouse. And so if you're putting a pull down menu on a website, on that page, you want to make sure that even though you think, well, people use their mouse for that, you think, well, think about Anthony. How can you make sure that all those choices are available to him, perhaps using the arrow keys on his computer? So that's something to think about. Then there's Jessie. Jessie actually has 2 learning disabilities. She has difficulty getting content down, typing her content on a keyboard even, but also writing something out. That's one of her disabilities. And the other one is she has difficulty reading. And so she uses speech output, actually text-to-speech software that converts text on the screen to voice, and she needs that to read it aloud to her. And so the first part of her first disability, she can handle as an assistive device in that she uses dictation software. And so she can get her thoughts down on paper. She may need to go back to, and on the screen, she might need to go back and edit, but she can at least get her thoughts down. Okay, so you don't need to know about that as an instructor. But the second one, if you have that PDF file, your syllabus I mentioned earlier, and it's not in an accessible format, maybe it's a scanned in image, her text to screen software cannot read that aloud to her. And so your disability support staff will have to reformat that document so she can read it if you haven't done it yourself. So think about making documents accessible when you think about Jesse. Hadi actually works for the IT accessibility team. And I put him on here because he actually teaches online. And so all the things that apply to students apply to him, and even more things he has to have. But he uses a device that's similar to Jesse's, but has more features. It's a screen reader. And so his technology will read all the text on the screen, but also gives him cues about the organization of the paper. For instance, you might have a 25-page document to read. Hadi, if you have formatted it right with the heading structure, heading 1, heading 2, heading 2, heading 1, just using the regular structure that's on your content page, in your learning management page, for example, if you form it that way, he can skim through that paper. And so like a sighted person, he can read what all the headings are. And so he knows what's coming up. He may realize, well, I don't really need to read this whole thing. I just need to read the summary, which is at the end. And so he can skip to that. It also warns him when there's a list coming up, a bulleted list or a numbered list. His screen reader will tell him that. And so he can be prepared to say, oh, there's a list of 7 items, get it. Where if you haven't formatted it that way, just maybe using some little dots, going to come across maybe as one long sentence that he's trying to figure out. So here are 4 people. So if you can borrow my friends here if you want, and you just think of these 4 people. If you make your course accessible to them, doesn't guarantee it's accessible to everybody, but it will be accessible to a lot of them. I'd say the majority of them. So just kind of think about them. So I'll get some tips now. These are based on universal design. And then next slide. And just some things. Okay, what do you do? Well, I'll start with what I've been doing here. I gave a presentation today. I spoke the critical content described on the slides. So my idea is I'm thinking that somebody can't see the screen. So I'm just kind of in the back of my mind thinking, what do we need to describe here? I didn't describe the features of the people that were on the screen. Some people would. And it's pretty much up to the instructor to decide if what they look like is important to the presentation. And so I made my call on that. I've used uncluttered slides, pretty uncluttered, plain backgrounds, don't have those fussy backgrounds that really distracts people who have some learning disabilities, but also people who have low vision. Make high contrast with the text. Spell out acronyms, like universal design. I didn't have a lot of acronyms today, but make you spell it out, particularly if you're going to use that acronym after that when you're speaking. And explain any jargon. And so I did that today. Now the tips on the next slide are some other things that I did. I point the students to specific resources to gain needed knowledge and skills. This I would do if I was asking you to read material before you came. Like I think it was Latasha that mentioned that you're going to get access to the slides. So you have access to the slides. And so that's good to point out because that can be very helpful. So you're not sitting there scribbling things down and then you realize you already have it. Recognize and avoid cultural ability and other assumptions. Use examples, assignments that are relevant to a diverse audience, and make them accessible. I have an assignment in my universal design class that you have to go out and look for a physical space, find an image of a physical space that you think shows universal design characteristics. And then you report it in a discussion list. So I asked myself, well, who won't that be accessible to? Someone who's blind, right? Because all these pictures out there, they're not necessarily going to be described and not even necessarily described in a way that would answer that question. So rather than make an alternative or an accommodation for this person who's blind in my class, before they even arrive, I say in the describing the assignment, alternatively, you could describe the physical space that you have been in where you think there's something that would be a universal design characteristic. So I just build in what could have been an accommodation. I call it universal design because I didn't make it an accommodation. I have people that use that alternative, and I don't believe they're blind, but my class is fully accessible, so they could be, but I don't think so. But they just were thinking, oh, I was in the auditorium with my kids last week, and I remember I saw da-da-da. So you just make an alternative writing the assignment. So we already talked about making multiple ways to learn, demonstrate learning, and engage, and caption your videos. Another one. And on the next slide, some more tips. Avoid long lectures and massive slide decks. Break things up as much as you can, chunk things up. And then organize it with headings and make sure that the headings are formatted. Overview at the beginning, summary at the end, to kind of bookend your program so that they are reminded where are we to do and what did we learn. And simplify and break down images and tables. That's the best advice I can give you. There are others for tables and things, but think about, even for all of your students, if you're going to show them a table on the screen, sometimes it's really hard to tease out what you want to show them. And sometimes they can be put into like 3 tables or an image or something. Think about that. And then use outlines and other scaffolding tools. Might help your students take the best notes they can in your class by giving them maybe your first set of notes or an example of how they can organize their notes. Some faculty would say, well, aren't they supposed to know that already? Well, yeah, I think so. But if they don't, is your choice to just not tell them? So that's not so good either. And then breaking down images and tables and avoiding strict cameras on policy. I like the cameras on when I teach using Zoom. I like to see the faces, but I also realize that having that camera on the whole time can add a lot of anxiety. It does for me, even if it's a long presentation, because I feel like I can't just be, fooling around. I gotta look like I'm paying attention, and so, or take a break. I don't want to do that. So anyway, so don't have a strict rule. It's okay to say, well, I prefer you have your images on, but it's not a requirement. And then clear instructions and expectations. And on the next slide, just want to take the last set of tips. Give people adequate time for practice. I give the students all the major assignments on the first day of class, not because I want them to get overwhelmed, but I tell them this, I want them to see what's coming up. And so they can decide if they can do parts of it, chunk it down for themselves. And I offer to help them if they want help with that. But I think it relieves a lot of anxiety ultimately, because they say, oh, this is what I have to do. And they can start checking things off. Use a small number of technology tools. A lot of people get overwhelmed when you use a whole bunch of technology tools. I ask myself whenever I'm tempted to use a new tool do I really need to use this, or something exists in Canvas I can use? For one thing, if you start using outside tools, sometimes they're not very accessible. So you have to check on that too. And then avoiding PDFs. That's what I do. I don't create PDFs. I can, but it's harder to like update them and make them more accessible if you make a change and so forth. And so I always put my content in the learning management page. That makes it really slick for everyone to just go to the different pages and so forth. And I only make one exception. I do that with my syllabus, but I do it in Word as well. Because the syllabus is one thing in my class that I think is useful for downloading to your desktop and kind of making it your own. Can't change the grade, but you just like taking out some things that don't involve you or something, and making notes about timeline and so forth you would like to have as this document for yourself. And so anyway, the last one here is using descriptive wording for, of course, hyperlinks and alternative text for images. That's for Haughty. Sometimes people like to have these hyperlinks look nice and slick with all click here, click here, click here, click here. Well, that's what Haughty reads with a screen reader. If he tries to skim through that page, his screen reader can go from link to link. He may want to know what's on that page, but it goes to link and it says, click here, click here, click here. Well, that's not very useful to Haughty. So what does he have to do to figure out what those links? Okay, well, he can start at the beginning and read through all the text and see what the text is before and after the link. That would be one way. Another way, he could just say, well, forget it. I'll just go to each link. and see if I can figure out where I am. And so that's not very satisfactory either. So this gets into usability. Technically, those links are accessible to Hottie, but I think we'd all agree they're not usable, not even close to as usable as they are for people who don't require them to be. So usability is, again, really important. So on this next slide, it's going to give a summary. This is how I think about universal design. I think of it as a whole bunch of different things, depending on what angle, what lens you use to look at universal design. First of all, I think it's an attitude. You start with an attitude that you're trying to make your course accessible to everyone and that you really mean it. And you don't just brush things off by saying, well, I don't think we have that many blind students at this school. And I know Ebony and her staff will bail me out. I know they're really nice over there. So don't brush it off. These are real students. You value all your students. And in the case of students with disabilities, the unique perspectives and the expertise that they bring should be of value, I think, if you value diversity in your class, as I do. It's also a framework, and I set out to develop a framework. So it's a building blocks. It isn't just a attitude, vague attitudes and framework. It's a goal that you'll never reach, probably, to make your class accessible as possible for everyone. Even says in the definition, as much as it's possible. I even say sometimes it's as much as is reasonable. Some you'd have to do, like if you had a simulation and to make it accessible to a person who's blind would be just huge barrier. Then you need to be working with the disability services staff to see how you might provide an alternative. There's some things that may not be reasonable, but not very many, I think. Most things are reasonable. It's a process, and that you kind of include it in your design process, so it doesn't end up to be a lot of extra work. You just work smarter. It promotes best practices. It doesn't lower standards. Some people get this idea that universal design is going to kind of make their course less than what they want it to be. That absolutely is not true. That's not what universal design does. So you're doing something different than universal design if you're lowering your standards. You're just helping a student learn something in a different way, or show what they've learned, level the playing field so they can tell you what they've learned. It's not that they're not going to learn as much. And you have your disability services office to guide you if all the way, in that regard. So it's proactive. You're kind of thinking ahead. You plan ahead. Even if you use a student in your class as an inspiration for universal design. I was talking to a computer science faculty member. This was in Portland, who was an on-site class. He says, hey, Cheryl, I know you work with students with disabilities. I've got a student with autism in my class, and I'm wondering what if I should offer them a different assignment when they give their class project reports. And I'm kind of my head is spinning. Well, what makes you think that they have autism? And they said, the dean told me. Well, how do they know that the student has autism? Oh, her parents came in. But I said, you didn't get a letter from disability services? No. I says, well, you don't know that they have autism then. That's not the way that that's a student's right to disclose, and that student is not disclosed to you. However, as long as you're talking about it, why would you think they need an accommodation for giving a presentation? Well, I just know because they never make eye contact. They just kind of fumble around with their papers and so forth. I said, well, are they doing poorly in the class? And he laughed. He said, oh, no, they're the best student. And I said, well, first of all, I wouldn't assume they can't do a presentation. That's unreasonable to make that assumption. But if they wanted accommodation, they should come to you to talk about that. But what instructions do you give your students? And he says, well, I just tell them they can do anything they want in 5 minutes, anything they want to present their project. I says, now that is going to create a challenge for a lot of students, not having any further direction. So I don't want to reduce their creativity. And I said, well, here's what I would do if I were you. I would create an outline of a reasonable presentation. 1 minute, introduce yourself and the topic you're discussing and why you're studying this project. Number 2, the objectives and the outcomes you're expecting from this project, blah, 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 all the way down to summary, the last minute or so. And give that to everybody. Just say you can do anything you want. However, if you're looking for an outline, you might want to start with this. Wow, that's it. That's all you have to say. And I saw him months later. He says, you will not guess what happened, Cheryl. And I said, no. He said, she gave a brilliant presentation. I said, well, why would I be surprised by that? He says, I said, you never told me anything that made me think she wouldn't give a good presentation. And so anyway, so he said that and I said, well, what about the outline? Did she use the outline? He says, I couldn't believe it. It was actually almost down. He was timing it with her. It was almost like within 5 seconds, each one of them. I said, well, that doesn't surprise me either. But some students would do that. But some students on the autism would do that, be very specific about that. But anybody else use your outline? He said, yeah, a few of them I could tell that they were using my outline. I said, well, you help the students. Those students may not have given a lot of presentations, and now you've given them a way, an outline to think about and giving a presentation. So that was good for that as well. So universal design, then it can be proactive, it can be implemented incrementally. You don't have to do everything at once. It benefits the eyes to benefit everyone. That's a goal. It minimizes the need for accommodations and supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's it. That's universal design. Hopefully that's useful as you continue this and today, but also in your teaching. That you think about universal design and think about these 3 sets of principles, and you can look some of the book that I have on the screen, but also in the Center on Universal Design for Education that has this filled out a little bit more. So if you go to the Center for Universal Design and Education, you find this framework. You'll find a document called Equal Access Universal Design Instruction, which is about 6 pages long, really ties each tip to a universal design principle, either in UDL or WCAG or universal design in general. So that's kind of interesting to look at. If you want a little shorter version, like 1 page, you can get 20 tips for teaching an accessible online course. That 20 tips will link to specific articles that give you even some more detail, like capturing your videos. Well, how do I do that? Link to something. So there's still a lot to learn. And so you can find that center at uw.edu/doit, DOIT/CUDE. So, and again, my name's Cheryl Burgstaller. I have my email address on the screen, so you'll have it with your document. If you want to email me on something about the presentation, something I said, or a resource that I mentioned, feel free. I like to talk about this topic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burgstaller. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today. I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to questions now. You can speak your question out loud or raise your hand, or if you're a little bit shy, you can type it in the chat to Miranda, and I will make sure that Dr. Burgstaller gets a chance to answer your question. If you're a little bit shy, and just to start us off, I want to ask one of the questions that I get a lot from faculty members in our fellowship engagement. Student engagement is a really big concern with hybrid and online education. Can you talk a little bit about how universal design actually increases student engagement, like having captions on their videos, having PDFs that can be read by screen readers, how that really helps increase course engagement, or what your experience has been with that?
Yeah, and I'll zero in on, of course, the documents and videos and so forth. But a big one is using your discussion board. I use a discussion board. And I worked with a number of faculty. We have to do a lot of peer review at the City University of New York, and some at the University of Washington too. But and one of the things is looking carefully at your discussion. And one thing faculty often do is have too much to be covered in one discussion, I think. They may have 3 points to be covered, and they're kind of distinct from each other. That's hard to have a discussion about 3 different things for any students. You go to answer that, and you say, sometimes we say, well, just discuss one of these. That's okay. Well, that's not going to include interaction, because people might be answering different things. So I like to think of my discussions, that almost all of them are just one question, really one big point. Once there's closely related things that might be 2 ideas into one question. But keep it short. And then always use the feature in your discussion, the Canvas, where they have to post a message before they can see the other students' responses. So then that actually gives you a lot of engagement. Then ask them to comment on one or two other posts that their classmates have met. Now let's think about that discussion if you did it in a class, in person. You'd throw out the question, the first person that answered it, everybody heard it. And so then you have to kind of come up with sub questions to keep the engagement going, or say, oh, does anyone want to comment on their thing or whatever? So in a class of 30 people, you can't engage 30 people in one discussion, but online you can. And when I teach hybrid classes, I do I have discussion in person, of course, but I usually have it in small groups and kind of make it more general. And so there's a lot of things they're talking about, but I really prefer the discussions online. I think that they help. I think they help focus students with disabilities, first of all, but all students benefit from that. And they have to come up with an original answer. Now, of course, I go to AI and let me all original, but anyway, they have to contribute something before they get to see something else. And so I just love discussion forum. And it's unfortunate because faculty often will say, well, I don't like to teach online because you can't get discussions going. But it's not the same as being in person. This is what we're doing today is not the same as me being there in person, but it's not bad. So useful.
Very true. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? All right, well, I actually have a follow-up. You mentioned AI.
Yeah.
Which is the other hot button issue in higher education. Right now, our team, Indra, who is today with us today, he's been doing an incredible amount of work with our teammate Razan around AI education and how it can help faculty members. But there's still a little, reluctance there.
Yeah.
In terms of AI in higher education, where do you stand on that, or do you have any guidance?
Yeah, I'm actually in this class I'm teaching starting in a couple of weeks. It's IT accessibility, and I decided I've told the students to kind of keep notes on through the course on things they can do in their own working situation, and also pick something new to learn. And so I said, now I'm focusing on AI, and then so throughout that course I'll give examples related to the topic that we're talking about, so like accessibility of documents. I actually went to AI and said, how do you design in a Word document or something? And made the point that you really have to know something about it to see if it's correct or not. But then I did it with another AI packaged, and then I actually and see then they could compare. We could compare together, and also even if you send a question to AI. If you wait 10 minutes, well, I don't know if you have to wait at all, but anyway, you get that answer, and then you wait a while, and you send exact same question to that same product, you get a different answer. And usually it's just the wording and so forth. So I'm a big fan of AI, but I'm very cautious. I like new technology. When I taught math, this will tell you how old I am, to some degree, calculators are coming out. And I was one of the first to buy $100 calculator at Sears and Roebuck and could only do arithmetic. And I created a little cable to my desk, and I'd let the students come and use the calculator when they're done with their homework. And so anyway, yeah, so I was doing that, and there was so much worry about kids not using the multiplication tables or whatever. And I thought I need to think about that some too, but it's here. It's like, and I feel the same. It's like, well, we have to just live with it. And how should it affect our instruction? I think it's still good for kids to learn the multiplication tables. I think we all have gotten pretty bad at arithmetic because of calculators. Well, so be it. It also gave us a lot more opportunities to do arithmetic better. But anyway, so AI, I feel kind of the same way about that. It's here to stay, so we need to kind of integrate it. One question I have as far as disabilities is there a bias shown? And there are some articles, one came out of the University of Washington, where if you were evaluating, the AI was evaluating applications for jobs or something, that showed a bias if someone mentioned their disability. That I worry about. Also worry about how, they're using, AI uses materials all over the internet, right? Well, a lot of them have bias, and I worry about them coming up with not an appropriate portrayal of people with disabilities. I haven't found a lot of that, by the way, in my fooling around with AI. But that I have a worry about that. So whether students with disabilities can use it and how it's presenting them, that group are my two big questions about that. They are paying attention to accessibility. Accessibility is more of a thing than it used to be, and so there are more companies that are paying attention. So most of them are pretty accessible. Our team gave them feedback in the early days when they first started coming out. And usually some simple thing that they were doing that made it hard for a person with disability to use. So Latasha, what do you think about AI, since you've been thinking about it too?
We are currently trying to use it to help scale our faculty support services for course content.
Ah,
So we are actually have one more month on the project. Where Miranda's been managing our students. Our faculty members, some of them were kind enough to give us some of their STEM materials. So we sort of started at the highest point of the mountain. So
yeah,
that the PDF, the inaccessible PDF STEM materials that were in our courses, and we asked the faculty members that's our biggest LMS accessibility problem. Like in most higher education institutions,
yeah,
those PDFs, like you mentioned, so we wanted to start there, and our STEM classes are our largest classes here at Case Western. So we wanted to benefit as many students as possible if we're going to put time into creating this tool. So Miranda and our enterprise, man, they have a very long name. Enterprise management and architect infrastructure. It's long, but they're great people. We've been working with them for the past couple of months to develop an AI tool that can be available to everybody on our team and who support the faculty members to create accessible course materials. Something like a GPT or something like that, where you could put your materials in. It would apply accessibility, web content accessibility standards to the document, and it of course won't be perfect, but it won't be as expensive or time consuming as it currently is to do.
yeah, yeah.
So I think it can be really good for that. So right now the students are training the bot with the materials that the faculty members were so kind enough to let us have. And we're hoping that in a month we have something that works and that we can start trying to scale a bit.
Yeah, that's good. One thing in my personal use, but also creating for my class is, I find the AI built this in Google. You notice in Google now, they'll give you an AI answer and then, okay. It used to be when I Google something about, I couldn't figure out how to do something, I'm using a software product or whatever, and even accessibility things. I would Google it and then I just get this long list, and out of the first 10, I could probably find one that's suitable. But now when I do the AI, when I look at the AI answer, it's usually pretty good, really good. I'm not finding it being accurate. Francine is shaking her head there. Yeah, try it sometime. Just random accessibility questions. And in my class now, one of the discussions is they have to use AI to ask a question about accessibility, and then kind of share with the group what their finding was. You have to really caution them. They've got to review them. Guys, it's just amazing what AI can come up with occasionally. Some sentences that are just way out of line.
Yeah, so that's one of the other points that I want to make about AI. They are general purpose tools. They are not smart enough. They will not be smart enough for, at least, the foreseeable future, to replace manual review. Francine and Miranda and I are always going on and on about, well, yes, I just had you do all these things. Now I need you to go back and check. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
But there is no chance of, at this current point, there is no chance of an AI tool being smart enough for it to be a magic wand for you.
Yeah.
You will always have to review, you will always have to add context. The human experience supersedes all. Even if
Yeah.
it could give you a perfect book written, you would still have to get other humans to read it. So I think that it's useful if like you have an initiative that you're trying to scale, or you have something that you already have plenty of background information on and you just need, sort of a dashboard or a template or, some data analytics or something like that to guide you along your way. But definitely, like you said, the information that it gives is not credible enough. It doesn't quite reach it, and it's a pulling from information. If you're not paying for it, a snapshot of the internet from 2021. So it's not, like I said, 85%. It can get you, 85% there, I think. But yeah, there's no chance that it would ever be able to learn everything that a faculty member has learned and turn it into something that people would actually want to complete, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, are there any more questions or comments? No? All right. Well, I will not hold you all today. I will not hold you all. Thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate each and every one of you that took their time out to come here today. Thanks, Indra. You guys have a good weekend. If you need any digital accessibility resources or support, please visit our digital accessibility webpage or contact us at tltaccessibility@case.edu. And please visit our list of resource guides that can help you make all of your content accessible. Until next time, thank you so much, Dr. Shel Bergstaller. Thank you, Ebony Porter. And thank you everyone for your time. Have a good weekend. All right.